If you look at a map of the world today, it feels like we are watching a board game where the board itself is constantly shaking. From the Red Sea to the Taiwan Strait, and from the plains of Ukraine to the borders of Pakistan, there is this undeniable surge in military activity. It makes you wonder, are we just witnessing isolated outbreaks of violence? Or is there a larger interconnected pattern at play?
It definitely looks like chaos on the surface. But if you look closer, there is a very calculated logic behind it. What we are seeing is essentially a massive, real time application of game theory. The players aren't just fighting for the sake of fighting, they are constantly calculating risks, testing boundaries, and trying to figure out exactly how far they can push without triggering a catastrophic, all out war.
So it is like a high-stakes game of chicken, but with multiple drivers on the road at the same time.
Exactly. And the rules of this game are changing rapidly. In the past, conflict was often binary. You were either at war or at peace. Today, we live in this permanent grey zone. It is a space where actors use limited force, cyber attacks, and proxy groups to achieve their goals, all while keeping the conflict just below the threshold of a major escalation.
Let's break down some of these theaters to see how this game theory actually plays out. Take the Middle East, for instance. We have seen a significant escalation in hostilities involving the US and Iran, directly impacting global shipping lanes. Why risk disrupting global trade? What is the payoff there?
The payoff is deterrence and leverage. For Iran and its allies, like the Houthis in Yemen, disrupting shipping lanes is a way of signaling capability. They are showing the world that they can inflict real economic pain without launching a formal war. It is a classic strategy of calibrated escalation. They push the envelope just enough to force the other side to negotiate or back off, but not so much that it triggers a massive military response that would destroy them.
And meanwhile, you have the Russia-Ukraine war, which has settled into a brutal war of attrition with constant attacks on critical infrastructure. In that case, the strategies seem much more direct, yet the underlying game theory remains. Both sides are trying to exhaust the other's political will and resources, while the rest of the world watches, trying to balance their support without getting dragged into a direct clash between nuclear powers.
Right, and that introduces the classic security dilemma. When one nation increases its security or defense spending, it naturally makes its neighbors feel less secure. So, they increase their spending too. That is why we are seeing global defense budgets skyrocketing right now. Everyone is arming themselves because they cannot trust that the other players will remain passive. Look at the situation around Taiwan and the South China Sea. China is keeping up constant military pressure with aircraft and vessel incursions. They are not launching an invasion, but they are signaling their presence and capability, forcing Taiwan and the US to constantly react and burn resources.
It is like a continuous stress test of the adversary's systems and resolve. And it is not just the major superpowers. We are seeing intense internal and regional conflicts, like the civil war in Sudan, where the army and the rapid support forces are locked in a vicious cycle of offensives and counterattacks. The risk of spillover into neighboring countries like Chad is incredibly high. Even along the Pakistan-Afghanistan border or the various insurgency fights across Africa, the dynamic is the same. The local actors are playing their own games of survival and dominance. But their actions are tied into this global web of alliances and supply chains.
It is an incredibly complex web, and trying to make sense of all these moving parts can feel overwhelming, which is actually a perfect moment to pause and mention the platform that helps us unpack all of this.
Yes, if you are looking for a way to cut through the noise and get deep, strategic analysis on these global shifts, you are in the right place. This is the new Sentinel. We cover everything from the strategic intricacies of global military operations to the cultural moments that define our daily lives. We believe in providing depth you can trust through expert interviews and sharp, unfiltered insights.
And if you are an entrepreneur or a business owner listening to this, you know how important it is to reach an audience that values substance and strategy. The new Sentinel is currently opening up advertising opportunities. It is a fantastic way to put your brand in front of a highly engaged, curious, and high-value audience. If you want to grow with us, reach out today, subscribe, and let's start a conversation.
Now let's get back to how technology is rewriting the rules of this global game.
Right. One of the most fascinating aspects of game theory in modern conflict is how technology has altered the cost-benefit analysis. In the past, projecting military power required massive investments: aircraft carriers, stealth bombers, standing armies. But today, we have cheap drones, precision-guided missiles, and cyber tools. How does that change the math for these players?
It changes it completely because it drastically lowers the cost of entry. Think about it. A non-state actor or a smaller nation can buy or build a fleet of drones for a fraction of the cost of a single traditional fighter jet. With those drones, they can threaten multi-billion-dollar naval vessels or disable critical energy infrastructure. When the cost of using force drops so significantly, the incentive to use it goes up.
That is a telling realization. It means the barrier to starting a conflict is lower than it has ever been. You don't need to be a superpower to disrupt the global order.
Exactly. And because the cost is low, the frequency of these low to medium intensity kinetic activities increases. Actors are willing to take more risks because the penalty for failure is no longer total destruction. They can probe for weaknesses, launch a gray zone operation, and if it fails, they haven't lost their entire military capability. They just try a different angle.
It also complicates the deterrence strategy for major powers. How does a nation like the United States deter an adversary when the adversary has so little to lose, or when their assets are highly distributed and cheap? You cannot easily deter a swarm of drones with a nuclear submarine.
You can't. The traditional model of deterrence, which relied on the threat of massive retaliation, is losing its effectiveness in these gray zone scenarios. Instead, we are seeing a shift toward deterrence by denial, making it too difficult or expensive for the attacker to succeed, rather than threatening to destroy them afterward. But that requires constant innovation and even higher defense spending, which feeds back into that security dilemma we talked about.
It feels like a self-reinforcing loop. High defense spending leads to better technology, which makes limited force cheaper and more accessible, which leads to more frequent conflicts, which in turn drives even higher defense spending. Is there any way out of this cycle, or are we destined to live in a state of permanent, low-grade global warfare?
That is the ultimate question. The saving grace, if you can call it that, is the complexity of our interlocking global systems. Even though the cost of force is lower, the cost of a total systemic collapse is still catastrophic for everyone. China relies on global markets, the US relies on global supply chains, Europe relies on global energy. These mutual dependencies act as a powerful constraint. The players might push the boundaries, but they are still highly motivated to keep the overall game from ending.
So the very complexity that makes the world feel so unstable is also the thing keeping it from falling apart entirely. It is a fragile balance, though. If one player miscalculates, or if an automated system triggers an unintended escalation, the whole house of cards could come down.
It is a razor's edge. And as we look to the future, the key challenge won't just be winning these individual games, but managing the system as a whole. We have to ask ourselves, are our international institutions and diplomatic frameworks capable of handling a world where the players are decentralized, the weapons are cheap, and the rules are constantly being rewritten in the gray zone?
It is a question that doesn't have an easy answer, but it is one we have to keep asking. The strategic landscape is shifting beneath our feet, and staying informed is no longer just an intellectual exercise, it is a necessity. Thank you for walking through this complex chessboard with us today. We will leave you to ponder where the next move might be made. Until next time, stay curious, stay vigilant, and keep searching for the patterns beneath the noise.